when I switched from medicine to art, I was in the States, and there was, a lot of shock, at least by, the people around me, my colleagues, things like that. People asked, "Are you going to be disowned? What have you done?"
Yeah, well, I guess medicine is like, like the pinnacle of ambition for your offspring, isn't it? It's, traditionally speaking, it's
traditionally speaking, yeah.
So, talking about your transition from your study in medicine to being an artist, what brought that shift about?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because I think when a lot of people hear that, they think that the two fields are separate, and not only that, but like diametrically opposed, that you couldn't possibly switch from one field to another in a more drastic kind of way. But my experience is that the two have always been married. I think I would actually make the argument that they're more alike than any fields.
Okay, so do you mean medicine specifically, and
I would say science.
Science, yeah, okay.
Both are about a quest for understanding. They're based in observation. They're based in trial and error. They're based on broad knowledge. There's so many similarities. So I didn't feel like it was, a surprising kind of thing, but it was the art of the science that had grabbed me in the first place. And using science as a way to augment an art practice and a way of living as an artist and seeing the world. And so, so it's just been deeply ingrained in my work from the outset, I think.
It's funny because the medical illustration side of it certainly comes across in your work, because you're often, referred to as a hyper-realist painter, and I don't know. I mean, medical illustration, it's a variety of hyper-realism. It's not exactly realism though. It's quite stylized, isn't it?
It is, especially when you're dealing with things that can't actually be detected. We don't have the technology to see certain things, so there is some invention. I mean, I'm sure we could talk for hours about what actually constitutes reality or not. But we watched this. I was watching this incredible documentary about Hilma af Klint, and she was fascinated in the things that couldn't be seen, like atoms. She was a scientist in a way. I mean, I think she was very enamored with the sciences. And there was an argument that was sort of made that there's so much more that we can't see versus what we actually can.
Yeah.
That trying to depict what's actually there is actually more inventive in a way. It's more probable that you'll paint something real by painting the unseen. I really like that.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
Just the chances of success are much higher. Excellent.
Exactly. And that's actually, that's where I'm at the moment with my practice in this particular series that I'm working on, is that I'm doing a series based on the zodiac. And I mean, if you want to argue it, it really was the first science.
Yeah, the boundaries are really blurry. And it's like when you speak to theoretical physicists, it sounds almost like they're maybe having a psychotic episode or something. But
exactly. Exactly. And I think all science sounded, like an episode at one point. I mean, whether it's Mary Shelley and surgery, and you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, astrology is an interesting one to tackle, because I guess it's been co-opted by, various charlatans over the years.
Yes. Astrology, just like so many things, it has a very, very wide, broad manifestation, I suppose. And I feel like if you look back through art history, because astrology was so deeply ingrained in the thinking, and like I said, it was, one of the earliest forms of science. And so it comes up not just in the imagery, but in terms of, archetype and allegory. So I think to disregard it is foolish, really. It would be kind of like disregarding Christianity when that has such an important impact on how images were made. So
yeah, completely. And arguably, it's got a longer and wider history than Christianity. And it's kind of that thing where there's that depth of cultural history to it. It's got to resonate at all sorts of levels within contemporary society. And I'm a big believer in this thing about like aesthetic resonances in those things, that there's certain iconographic forms that have evolved really over tens of thousands of years, and they must become embedded in some way in the in the human brain. And part of what's happening with artistic practices is teasing at those things or tugging at them in certain ways. So
collective unconscious, or
something like that.
Self. I mean, what are your stances on that? It's and the thing too is I've gone the other direction as well, like looking at astrology in terms of its cultural history and its relationship to science, but also just as a system and what that does. So basically making sense out of chaos, taking abstract forms to mean other things. And I think that's where the music component has really come into this project as well.
Yeah. So this was the project where you created a score, right?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. So I've now so that was a piece in and of itself, but I'm now expanding it because I like this relationship between the imagery and starting off with something that's concrete, like a picture of an animal, and then how that kind of evolves from something literal into these abstractions, which are the constellations, which then evolve again into another abstraction that's completely image free. So the music, the score.
And so the music, so you're saying that the music is a standalone piece, or you would perform it alongside the imagery, or it's
So it was originally a standalone piece. It was performed at the Abbotsford Convent, and essentially I hand painted each constellation of the zodiac onto glass, and then this cellist that I've collaborated with for a number of years played each constellation as though it were a piece of sheet music. So I created an algorithm that assigned note values to each one of those stars, or representations of the stars. But I just felt at the end of that it wasn't fit. Like that performance was complete, but I just felt like there was more to mine, and there was more potential to expand the meaning of this piece. So
okay. So what's the next iteration of it looking like?
Right. So basically, I mean, large scale, the way I wanted it to be set up almost like a Stonehenge kind of space. And each, I'm painting each animal of the zodiac. These are reverse glass paintings. They're all monochromatic. I wanted the focus to be on the textures of those animals, to see if it was possible to distinguish between scales and fur and all those kinds of things. It's glass is becoming more and more significant as well, I think, as the years go by.
So what you've been working, like the reverse glass painting has been kind of part of your practice for a few years now, right?
Right. So I started that in about 2015. My husband and I went to Italy, and there was this villa on Lake Como that we did a tour of, which was really pretty rad. And the guy that owned the place had this collection of 18th century reverse glass paintings. And I just remember walking by them and feeling like, this divine moment, that would be the conduit, that would be the thing that would help me figure all this stuff out. And before that, like, I was really interested in empty spaces and negative space, but I was depicting that empty space with these sort of flat colors. And when I saw the glass, I realized that I could have actual empty space instead of a facsimile of empty space, and that was really attractive. And the first painting that I sat down to do is just a total train wreck. I tried to be almost over logical about it. So the second attempt was a lot more intuitive and I kind of let go. So I think there is a point where that kind of logic can stand in your way. Yeah,
you do have to let the intuition guide a lot. It's funny really, because as you say, with doing highly skilled representational painting, it's that so much of it is not logical actually, or at least it's not really possible for the artist to articulate the logic of putting the painting together. It's done a lot by feel.
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't know if you find it, but I still find myself going up to a canvas and thinking, I have absolutely no idea how to paint this object that I'm setting out to paint. I'm just going to have to try and fudge my way through it.
When I sit down to paint something hyper real, I don't even know what it is that I'm looking at anymore. It becomes a total abstraction. It's just about those abstract kind of relationships between value and edge quality and those kinds of things. So
it's such a balance between knowing exactly how much information to put in the painting versus when you're allowing the viewer's brain to do the work, because ultimately that's where the illusion of reality is occurring. It's not you're not recreating a reality on the actual painting.
Totally.
Yeah, it's happening in the brain. If you did literally try and paint at the molecular level, that would be a completely different thing. But you're nowhere near doing that.
I remember getting asked years ago, why don't you just take a photograph? And this kind of thing in this discourse that we're having, it's just totally different. It's not the same experience as taking a photograph at all.
It's not, and it's not the same thing looking at a photograph either, because I always think that when I'm looking at works that are painted, that there's that intentionality there. There's always a decision to include, and even if it's a painting that is allowing paint to exist, as its material self. So it's not attempting to be illusionistic. There's still an intentionality behind allowing the paint to be on the canvas in the way that it is.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel, with a photograph, it can be composed and manipulated in any number of ways, but at a certain point, it's like you're still just capturing the light that's bouncing off the object. So there's a different type of intentionality at work. The kind of intimate connection you get with a painting, it really means something. It's something valuable.
For sure. And the handmade and the presence of the hand as well.
And that's what I think, that's what's interesting, I think, in some ways about the reverse glass painting, of course, is that what's being presented to the viewer obviously is that very, that cold, if you like, mechanical kind of surface, right? It's not the luscious painty texture that's on the other side, that's the inaccessible side.
Oh yeah, you nailed it. And that was such an important discovery as well. The glass has just been, it's kind of been a revelation for me.